Hi, welcome to Therapy for Nerds. These are your hosts, Cassidy Russell,
Abbey Ronquillo.
And Katie Busse.
and today we're talking about nostalgia. So, Abby, how about you start us off?
So I was just thinking, as I was perusing through Netflix and not knowing what to watch, there are a lot of shows popping up nowadays that are kind of geared towards this idea of nostalgia or like reboots that, people always talk about. And a lot of people talk about how there's just no creativity anymore. People just keep doing the same show over and over again. But I really think it's something deeper than that. I think the reason that these shows are being remade or continued is because that sense of nostalgia.
It's interesting because I think it also brings nostalgia to generations who didn't watch the original, who didn't have the nostalgia of the first airing of that show. And I think it's something that it also kind of connects the generations because the people who grew up watching it at that time can watch it, say, with like their kids now and be able to share that experience together too.
Yeah, I feel like we're able to build upon it and really make things into something that fits more with this new generation. When you were talking about that, that reminded me of the new DuckTales, right? And I don't know if either of you have watched the new DuckTales, but I love how it builds on the original. Because the original was known for being one of the first shows, especially animated shows, to have overarching storylines and storylines that would take like 5 episodes to do, which was really unheard of, especially for a kids' cartoon show, which were meant to have a reset button at the end of the episode so that kids could watch whatever episode and not feel like they're left out or don't understand what's happening because they could be walking in at any point in the series, right? It's not now with streaming, it's kind of expected that you're watching it and binging it all back to back to back. So this new DuckTales really, I feel like, capitalize on that and has this like season long mystery of what's going to happen. Are we going to ever meet the mother and that kind of stuff? So it's definitely interesting just how they were able to shape that show for a new generation.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you talked about that too, Katie, because I feel like there's even new shows talking about nostalgia. There's even new shows that aren't reruns or reboots or anything like that that are set in like older times. Like I'm thinking Stranger Things,
Mhm.
which maybe even may bridge that gap as well, where parents can be like, oh yeah, we used to dress like that, or we used to go to the arcade and do stuff like that. And that's also like a talking piece for families.
Yeah, that's so true. Like the idea of even if it's not a show you watch, but the environment of it, the way of dressing and the houses and the just the experiences. It's like a way of being able to bring those to the present. So I wonder then with what we're saying with this idea of bringing the past to the present, like what do we feel like is it that draws people to wanting to feel that again, to feel like maybe they were a kid or have that nostalgic feeling?
I mean, who doesn't want to feel like it's not the year 2020?
Yeah, anything feels better than 2020, huh?
I know all these shows were like made not in 2020, but it's definitely one of those things where it's like, I really don't want to watch people talking on Zoom. I don't want to watch people living through the pandemic. Maybe I will in the far off future, but I don't think I will. I don't even know if I ever will want to watch something based off of this year, to be completely honest. I don't know. Where do you guys sit with that?
I haven't even thought about that. I haven't even thought about like what people will make of this year. I had a client talk to me the other day, and she's a senior this year, and she was talking about how she was really looking forward to buying her yearbook, and they're selling yearbooks this year, and she's like, but I don't know what they're gonna put in it, and I was like, wow, that's true.
Yeah. Who knows if they'll even get to sign yearbooks this year?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's tough because like, yeah, what is going to come out of this year? Like, I feel like it's going to be a distant memory of like masks and toilet paper after a while. Like, I don't think there's going to be much content,
Yeah.
you know. I mean, but to be fair, there is a lot because it's definitely a test of resiliency right now of getting through these difficult times. And honestly, what we were talking about with the shows, I can hear that almost harkening back to what we were talking about last time with the escape, the good things. Like, we're going to go off to our yesteryear when things were different and easier and made sense. And I could see why people would be so drawn to that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and sometimes I even think about it, like, was our childhood really that easy, or were we just kind of naive to the idea of like what was around us, right? What was happening in the 90s and the early 2000s? Because there was a lot going on, like 1999. I know it wasn't a whole year, but there was that whole millennial like pandemic of its own, of people freaking out that your computer was going to explode. And I don't really recall. I was too young to really remember like what people were doing about that. I just remember people buying water.
I remember people worried about it, but it felt like and I mean, we've lived through so many end of the world scenarios. It felt like the 2012 end of the
Yes.
world to me, where people talked about it, but they didn't really believe it was happening. And maybe that's just like my white middle class neighborhood really wasn't that concerned about it. But I I don't know, man. It's weird.
Yeah, but it's funny because that does kind of remind me of how the pandemic started, where there was like this kind of almost mass hysteria of buying up toilet paper and all these different products for fear of like, I'm not even really sure what a lot of people were afraid of or if they even knew. But just the idea of like things are bad, I have to prepare.
Yeah. I think it was that uncertain, like exactly what you're saying. Like they didn't know. It was just a very uncertain time, and nobody knew what was going to come out of it. So they figured, just prepare for everything. And maybe that's why nostalgia is so nice. It's kind of like this idea that we know what's going to happen. Like when you watch, for the most part, when you watch DuckTales or you watch these other shows, you know the characters, you're familiar with them, you know what they're about, and maybe they're going to go on a new adventure, but you kind of know their feeling and what their character is like, and maybe that's what makes us feel safe.
I feel like that's what makes the show Phineas and Ferb so popular, is just because it's a show where you know everything that's going to happen because it happens the same every episode. There's even lines that they're going to say, and you know that they're going to say it. And it's typically in the certain order. And you know at the end of the episode, the mom's not going to see it and they're not going to be busted. But there's just, because I might have been watching that recently on like Disney Plus, but there's something so comforting in just knowing exactly how it's going to go, but having those little tweaks that make it a little bit different each time.
I don't know if it was with you both that I was talking about this with, but I know there's a study somewhere that talks about how survivors of trauma as well as children don't enjoy watching new things. They like watching the same things over and over again because of that sense of security. And probably Phineas and Ferb is probably a good example of that kind of just like, or like, why does a kid watch Cinderella 5 times? It's because they know what's going to happen and they enjoy that feeling of like, I don't need to know. I don't need to think about what's going to happen. I already know.
It's predictable and it feels safe ultimately.
Yeah. Which I think we're all really craving a sense of safety right now.